Welcome to today's Computer Club meeting. Today we're going to actually talk about virtual machines. Now I'm going to discuss the details of the virtual machine, but because it takes a little while to install it, I'm actually going to have you do the install of the virtual machine first off and then discuss what the purpose of it is. So we're kind of doing this a little bit out of order. So what I want you to do is either if you go on to the Computer Club's website, www.palmbeacstate.edu/faculty/Horvath club, I've put a couple of links out there to the VMware player. And VMware is basically one of the ways that you can run a virtual machine on a computer. There are other versions out there. This actually is a free version. And you'll want to download this either from the internet or if you go into the Windows Explorer, you can actually connect up to my computer and download these from my system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these and put them onto my public folder so they're available to you out there. All right. Right. So if you want to, go ahead and click on the VMware player because I think that you should be able to download. That's a pretty fast download. The other part with the Ubuntu download, I'll probably have you copy it just from the local system. So go ahead and click on the VMware player. And then go ahead and just do a download. Let's see. Let's see. Here. Go ahead and close this one up. Wait a second. Let's see. Which one do we want? Choose this one, the 3.1.3. 1.3? Yeah. Yeah. All right. And let's see. Go ahead and do, let's see. Is it going to let us do this? Oh. You know, it's going to require you to register to download this. So instead of downloading it, let me have you do what I wanted you to do originally, which is actually to connect up to my network share. So go into Accessories and go into the Windows Explorer and go ahead and connect up to my computer. So you're going to put / 192.168.240.200. And you should see a folder out there that's called Users. All right. And let me just make sure that I've given everybody permission to go and access that public folder. Yeah, go ahead and go to that. Okay, I've got all the file sharing on. Let's see. All right. All right. And let me make sure everybody got there, okay? Because I actually turned off the password protection. Okay. All right. So let's talk about virtual machines and their purpose while you're doing this install. Now, one of the reasons that people want to use virtual machines is that they actually want to run multiple different operating systems on the same piece of hardware. Now, you can, of course, do that by doing a dual boot, where you would boot, let's say, with Windows 7 and Linux Ubuntu. All right, let me click on this. But if you do that, you're actually going to modify the bootloader, which is all right. But there may be situations where you don't want to actually touch the Windows bootloader. So that's one of the reasons you would run a virtual machine. Okay? So you can run multiple operating systems on one computer without modifying the bootloader. Now this also makes sense if you don't want to buy additional hardware. You can run a whole bunch of different operating systems on just one piece of hardware. Okay. Right. Oh yeah, no, that's fine too. Yeah, either way. And I'm just going to do the install on here, because that's going to take a little while. All right. Now this is also useful if you want to do testing. All right. Now a lot of times, for instance, let's say when people are application developers or they're running, let's say, database management systems, they may not want to modify their main production system. They may want to run that software in a virtual machine. All right. Because if they do something that actually corrupts the entire operating system, they're not going to bring down their main machine. So a lot of times when people want to have experience with using new operating systems or testing new pieces of software, they'll run it inside of a virtual machine. Now what's really nice about this too is that, let's say that a lot of people like to test a lot of different kinds of software that, like white hat hacking software. Well, unfortunately, a lot of those pieces of software actually have viruses and worms attached to them. And if you ran those on your main system and they got on your system, it's going to be very difficult to bring your system back to its stable state. So what you can do is actually run those types of pieces of software inside of a virtual machine. So this actually gives you isolation as well. You're isolating those particular applications from affecting other applications. All right. So if that one application crashes the system out, basically you can just install a new virtual machine, or what's really neat with the virtual machines is you can actually save their state within inside of a file and basically go back to an earlier state. Now with the piece of software we're using right now, the VMware player, you can't do that. You actually have to buy a fuller version of this, which is a VMware workstation, which actually lets you take snapshots of this system at certain points in time, which is really, that's really neat. Let's see, what else can we do?
So it treats it as an operating system as a folder, not like an operating system.
Right, but when you run it, it looks no different than an operating system. Now, some of you have taken my server-side programming class. You know that in that class, we basically put all of the software on one physical machine. But really, in the real world, you should have a multi-tier architecture. That means that you should have, let's say, your web server on one machine. You're probably going to have a firewall. All right? You can have a software firewall on another machine. And then on a third machine, you're going to have your database management system. Now, if you really did want to have these multi-tiered applications, you would actually have to have 3 physical computers. But what you can do with a virtual machine is you could set up 3 virtual machines on one piece of hardware. And you could isolate, let's say, your database from the internet by actually implementing a firewall. So that allows you to go in and do things that maybe you don't have, let's say, the funds to actually complete. All right, let's see how far along we've gotten on it. Let's say that, for instance, you had, what do I mean by this? Let's say that you had a system that had 8 gigabytes of RAM. And let's say you had a quad-core CPU. All right. That's your base system. That's your actual physical system. When you're running your virtual machine, you could actually say, well, in this case, give them just 512 megabytes of RAM. And let's say that you would say, all right, it actually is a 2-processor system or a 1-processor system. With 2 cores. All right. And in the case of our class, okay, let me have you restart on this. So in our case, what we're actually going to do is we've got a system that actually has 2 CPUs inside of it. But, oh, we lost our connection because I shut down. I'll restart it. Okay. So when we actually create our virtual machine with the Linux Ubuntu, we're actually just going to say 1 CPU with 512 megabytes of RAM. And we're going to specify the amount of physical hard disk space that that virtual machine is going to take up. And usually with Linux Ubuntu, it's about 10 gigabytes of space. All right. Now we just have to wait for the more interesting part for 1 second until this gets rebooted. All right. But any questions on why you would want to run a virtual machine? All right. Now, the piece of software I'm going to show you, and that you've already installed on your computer, is the VMware player. This is a free software, all right, and it will allow you to create virtual machines. Now, there's newer software out there that's pure open source, fully supported. That's called Zen. And there's also from Sun Microsystems, there's a VirtualBox. And, of course, there's Hyper-V on Windows Server. And also from Microsoft, there's a virtual PC. But I've actually had a lot of success with VMware, both on Windows and Linux-based systems. So that's why I'm giving you a demonstration of this. So what I'd like you to do is to connect up back to my computer again and copy that Ubuntu desktop i386 over to your desktop. Now, this is actually a 32-bit version of Linux Ubuntu. Now, on my website, in case you want to do this at home, I did put a link where you can download this ISO image. Now, what's nice about this virtual machine is that we can do an install without having to burn it to a CD-ROM or a DVD. We can directly run this ISO image. Now, I know some of you are still probably copying this down, but let me just show you how it works. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the VMware player, and hopefully everybody has that installed on their system. It's running, but it's not ready. It's not ready. Okay, we just have to be patient. Oh, there we go. Yay. Okay. All right, so let me start my VMware player. Okay.